Oh, yeah, he's back. Time for more of the Rod Pedersen Show.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. It is episode 195 of Canada's only morning sports talk show. And coming up, Ray Elgard from Las Vegas and also Jim Lang. What are you laughing at, DuPont?
Brett's comment at the bottom.
No, that was
Okay,
horrible.
Brett Upton writing in from Saskatoon. He says, remember the Vegas anthem singer who sung Oh Canada like Oh Christmas Tree? Thankfully, he made up for it 2 weeks later. Yes, Casey Parks. You can find it on YouTube. And I get, we had a little talk in the break here because Clark said, Clark, I'm just going to throw you under the bus here for a second. You're used to it. He said, just don't go too long with the author. I'm like, I'm sniffing that this is going to be really good. It ended up being really good. But when you're young, he's younger than you. Mm-hmm. They don't remember that era of CFL football.
And you kind of touched on it just reminds me in so many ways the USFL and the documentary, the 30 for 30, the characters and the people that were involved with it. And you talk about anthem singers or Las Vegas or some of the big name guys. Like, again, the USFL, they had some big name, Doug Flutie, Jim Kelly, David Archer, and some of these guys that were in the CFL at that time. But the stories
Steve
that
Young.
went around it are tremendous. Like, you could literally, he's done a book. Wilkes has done a book. You could literally do a great documentary on those.
There's no doubt,
like,
and
it would
they
be fantastic.
and they should. Maybe if we get into the documentary business,
Paul!
we will. Yeah, we've talked about it. But I remember this, fellas. 94, 95, whenever Casey Parks butchered O Canada at Sam Boyd Stadium in Las Vegas.
Been there.
I was listening out the trunk of my car at Craven.
Really?
At Big Valley Jamboree with my best friend from the cradle, Christopher Ronald Winkler. And we were listening to the broadcast on CKRM, and Casey Parks launches into, Oh Canada, Oh Canada. And we're looking at each other. What the hell is this? It was
How
coming
many
out of the...
Pilsner have we had today?
It was coming out of the radio. And Jeff Courier and Carm Cartieri will tell you to this day that it was so hot in that stadium and in that city that they stripped down to their underwear. They were broadcasting in their underwear. That's how hot they were in Las Vegas that day. It was July 94, 95.
The Italian Stallion.
Yeah. So
Tarps off.
Tarps off for the boys in the broadcast booth. By the way, I just want to read this tweet from Michael Zaplitny. Michael Zaplitny, he is a radio legend in this province. He tweets, the power is on, the natural gas is flowing, clean water is coming out of our taps, and nasty water is removed. Hospitals are open and working. There is food. Most people are not sick. We are fortunate and blessed. Thank you, Michael Zaplitny, for that. And that's just to, again, try to quell some of the panic that's going around. To the Prairie Mobile text line, you can reach us anytime at 306-840-8777. That's 840-8777. Prairie Mobile, your authorized SaskTel Mobility dealer. Irene in Saskatoon writes in. She is an ER nurse practitioner.
Thank you for your work.
She says, first of all, thank you, Irene. She says, LOL, love the toilet paper. Do you have hand sanitizer too? I want to point this out one more time. This is virtual toilet paper on the wall behind me. I apologize for our online listening audience. That's from the boys downstairs who are bored twiddling their thumbs.
Took me a while yesterday.
From Stephen Kleinsasser, writes in from Martinsville, from the 471. He says, hey, Rod, great show. If you need something to talk about, can you talk about your perspective from the broadcast booth during the 13th man deal in 2009? I was working in North Dakota, combining corn. My brother was watching the game, and he had his phone up to the TV so I could listen to it. Again, Stephen Kleinsasser checking in. He was in North Dakota at the time.
Were you even in the booth at that point?
Oh, yeah. There's a long, sordid story to that, by the way, and a good one. People said they loved the story, so let's go with the stories.
Yes.
Come on.
I thought you were on the field by that point.
No, there's a story.
Yeah, well, I want to hear it now.
So it's 2009 Grey Cup. As was the bane of my existence, I couldn't be in two places at once. I was getting ripped apart by the Regina Pats ownership that I was a Grey Cup week when they were starting their West Coast road trip down in the Pacific Northwest. So I was down in Seattle, Everett, to start that week. Pats had games. The radio network, Chorus Radio, which was carrying the broadcast nationally on the radio, called me ahead of the time, and they said, Rod, we want you to call one half of the football game. Right. And I said, you would know this story. You and I were together all the time.
Yeah, but I don't know the ending.
And obviously. I said, I don't want to call one half of the football game. If I can't call the whole game, I don't want to call any of the game. And the guy's name was John Voss. And he says, well, you can't be the star. We're offering you a half the game. I said, it's not about being the star. Would you ask a referee to ref half the game? It's dumb. I just don't want to call any of it. It's an insult to the profession in my mind. And he goes, well, we're offering you, the second half. And I said, no, my mind's not changing. And what ticked me off was I was in Calgary for the start of the week, Monday, Tuesday, and then I'm leaving to go to Seattle, and I'm getting all the CFL people ripping me to shreds that I'm leaving during Grey Cup week and my team's in the game. Yet I got this ownership of this hockey team pissed off that I'm not going to be with them for the whole trip. Welcome to my life. So anyways, the morning of the game, actually I called 4 games on that trip now that I think about it. Tri-City, Spokane, Seattle, Kent. And I flew in Sunday morning of the Grey Cup game, and they said, Rod, are you going to call the game? And I said, yes, I will. And they said, well, you're going to call the first half. And I said, well, you told me on the phone I was going to call the second half. They go, that's changed. Do you still want to do it? And I said, yeah, sure. So I walk into McMahon Stadium, and we're coming to a crescendo, folks. Hang on. I'm taking the long...
No, I like this.
Okay, I'm taking the long way around. So I'm walking into McMahon Stadium, and the music's blaring over the stadium. And by the way, how many times have I said I like McMahon Stadium? It's my guilty pleasure. I don't have a problem with McMahon Stadium. I like it. I've always liked games there. Even when I was a fan, I liked games there.
I hate it there.
The stadium was blaring, "Tonight's Gonna Be a Good Night" by Black Eyed Peas.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, it is. Riders are going to win, baby. Yeah, I'm psyching myself up, right? Going in to call this game, call the first half, and... that was a debacle and a disaster in and of itself, too, but for other reasons. The commercial breaks were 2 minutes long, but they sold 3 minutes of spots, so we were missing all these plays. I got Carm Cartieri on my right, I got Ed filling in on my left, and the game's going on, there's commercials running, and I'm looking back at the producer going, what the hell? And they oversold the broadcast. I'm getting hell. They're missing plays. Wasn't a great day. So when we got to halftime and my role was up, I took the headphones off. Tunk. See ya. And I went down to the sidelines.
Right, okay.
And I'm on the sidelines for the second half, and I'm like, this is kind of cool, man. I haven't been on the sidelines since the early to mid 90s, around the Riders. So I'm there, and I'm into it. Steve Mazurk's like 10 yards down the sidelines. The Rider bench was here. Gainer's there. And it's all Rider fans.
And it was
stadium,
going
right?
well.
Everything was going great. They got a 16-point lead going into the fourth quarter. I'm thinking, how can they screw this up? There's no way. Well, the lead started to dwindle, but I don't know, with about 4 minutes to go, I think the Riders scored a touchdown, and I remember literally jumping up and down with Gainer. We're hugging each other on the sidelines, and I'm designing in my mind what the Grey Cup ring is going to look like, and this is going to be awesome. And then everything went to hell. We all know the story. And we get down to the Damon Duval, the field goal, and he misses. And all of a sudden, everybody thinks the game's over. Right. And it's, with all due apologies to our war friends and our Canadian Armed Forces people, it felt like a war zone because fireworks are going off, music's playing, streamers, right? Everybody's going crazy. And all of a sudden, I'll distinctly remember Neil Hughes coming back to the bench, got his helmet, rifling at the bench, and screamed a word that rhymes with schmuck. And I'm like, what?
So you were at the bench?
I'm right there.
Yeah, so you were on the sideline.
I'm like, what the hell is going on? What?
Right.
And all the flags were down in the other end. So the guys knew. Duval rarely misses to begin with. He's not going to miss on a second chance. No. So when it came down to the last play, we know what happened. Riders lose the game 28-27, I believe was the final. And I didn't even go into the locker room after. I didn't even go in. We were all stunned.
I had to.
You had to for your job, and I guess I probably should have, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to see my buddies in that. We all had our own cross to bear on that. Mm-hmm. And I guess the other interesting point was, it's 2009. Cell service isn't quite then what it is now. The guys in the booth were texting me. Now that I think about it, Mark Stevens,
that's right,
and Rick Moffat was calling the game. The guys were texting me and they were saying, "Rod, get up here. It looks like the Riders are going to win. Come up and call the last 3 minutes." So as the stadium drained when the game was over, all of a sudden my phone's going ding, 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 ding. All these texts start coming in. They wanted me up to call the end of the game. And I'm thinking, thank God I didn't get these messages because I wouldn't have wanted to call it.
Right.
I wouldn't have known what I would have said. I would have sworn. I don't think there's any doubt that I would have sworn.
Really?
Yeah.
Pretty sure. And I also remember this. I had to go back up to the press box to get my briefcase, and I was walking to the elevator down with Bob Irving, and I can't remember what else, or who else. And Knuckles puts his arm around me, and he goes, "Crappy ending for you guys, great for the CFL." And I'm like, "Bob, how can you say that?" But I get it.
Yeah.
Great story.
Yeah.
And Bob's like everybody's favorite uncle. You could never be mad at Bob.
Yeah.
But at that time, I wasn't in the mood for looking at this from the national perspective. I was looking at it from a Rider perspective, and I'm thinking, you count these championships. It's not we'll get them next year. Do you know? There's none of that.
In Saskatchewan.
No, and then Mike McCullough saying, "Don't ever let anybody tell you that a game comes down to doesn't come down to one play," because that did. And I'll tell you one more. The next morning, we were flying home, and I remember Bob Wiley. I will never forget. Bob Wiley was the O-line coach, the now legendary O-line coach because of Hard Knocks.
Yep.
He was friggin' fit to be tied. Like, he was still mad the next morning at the airport, and he was just like, "How do you screw that up? How do you screw that up? Personnel thing. This is pro football." And he's like kicking the thing. You don't ever get over that. No. You don't ever get over that.
Especially if you're was on that team and wasn't there in 13, which there wasn't a lot of them.
Yeah. Or in 07.
Yeah, any of that carryover, because if you're a guy that ends up, if you're Omar Morgan,
oh, don't.
It haunts you. It haunts you forever.
It sure as hell does, because Omar Morgan's a very good friend of mine, the O-Dog, and he left the Riders in 07 because he thought he'd have a better chance of winning with Edmonton. Yep. Riders win without him. He comes back. Yep. And there's actually a photo on my website, rodpedersen.com. If you Google Omar Morgan, you'll see the photo of him walking to the plane after the game.
After 9?
10. 10.
Oh, 10.
But so he lost 2 more Grey Cups after that.
That's Marion Hossa, right? Has to sit with Pittsburgh to watch Detroit win the Cup, then goes and signs with Detroit in the offseason, gets to the Cup final against Pittsburgh and watches Pittsburgh wins it.
And it's happened, but it doesn't make it any easier on those guys when they look back at their career. That just the odd decision, If Kavis can count.
That's the odd thing, by the way, is Omar Morgan has been inducted into the Plaza. He's been chosen for induction. He would get a ring, because with Plaza induction you get one, but he has he's one of the few that I know of to have turned down the opportunity to go into the Plaza for his own reasons. But interesting stories. Speaking of interesting stories, Ray Elgart has logged in and he's ready to go. The legendary 81 will join us from Las Vegas to open up hour 2. It is the Rod Pedersen Show on Facebook Live, coming to Game Plus Network in April, and listen live at rodpedersen.com.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.